Hi, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and today I want to talk to you about how to divide your clumps of peonies so you can have multiple clumps throughout the garden, or like I do, you can pot them up and share them around or sell them in your local market. Now to me, peonies are the quintessential anchor plant for the late spring, early summer garden. They bloom at the same time as my earliest of roses. They come up with large, multiple stems, great for cut flowers, very distinctive. You'll see varieties like Buckeye, Belle, or Coral Sunset, or Bowl of Beauty. Wonderful looking peonies, very showy in the garden. So dividing them, here's the thing, them being a wonderful anchor plant, they would be happy to sit in your garden for 30, 40 years undisturbed if they've got a spot they like, which is great for garden performance, but not so great for you if you want more plants. Now you can divide them, but they will sulk a little bit afterwards. I want to show you how to do it, when to do it, give you through the whole process here so we can talk about how to successfully divide peonies in the garden. The time to divide your peonies is in the fall. If you've ever noticed their life cycle, after they do their flowering, sometimes during the heat of summer, they will kind of just sit there with their leaves out in a sort of a semi-summer dormancy, not growing particularly, just sitting there and gathering energy into their foliage. You look at the leaves now, they're starting to take the nutrients and push it back down into the crown of the peonies, and the peonies like it when there's soil moisture and the cool temperatures. This is the time of year that they tend to do their best root development. So it's the time to strike. You can get in there, pull up the clump, just as they're starting to develop their eyes for the following year. You can see where the eyes are, cut it apart, and divide it into successful clumps. As a side note, I'll give you some footage now of some clumps of peonies that have been prepared for sale for me by my bare roots supplier, and you can see that this is exactly the time of year that they're taking them out of the fields. They've broken them into sections here that have large storage roots and the eyes that you can visibly see at this point, so this is the time of year that the professionals do it too. Using a pitchfork, I'm now going to go ahead and start loosening the soil around the perimeter of the plant. I'm going to work a pretty wide circle to begin with, just so that I don't actually break off any roots on the outside. And the amount of work that this is going to take for you is going to very much depend on how heavy your soil is. In a light or sandy soil, this may be a lot easier to do. On my soil, it's very heavy, almost a clay soil. So I'm going to take my time. And once I feel like I've freed up most of the roots, then I'm going to grab the whole thing, in this case just using the leaf stems as my handle, and pull up the whole clump. Okay, so far so good. What I want to do now is remove some of these weeds, get rid of these leaves, get those out of the way, so I can get a good look at what I'm doing. I'll be removing some of these root sections that have broken off. Anything that's loose or broken off, get rid of that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray this with a sharp spray of garden hose water, just to get rid of this excess soil here so we can get a look at what we're doing. With the soil hosed off from the base, it's obviously a lot easier to see and, importantly, easier to move around and manipulate at this point. And I want to give you a quick look at some features here. First of all, these are the storage roots down here. You can see that even though I was careful in digging it out, it's inevitable that you're going to break off some of those storage roots, but it's not important because you don't need them all. You just need a couple of decent storage roots attached to the crowns, or to the these up here are the eyes. And typically, I'll give you the rule of thumb here, is that if you had something, a final division that had two eyes on it, if that was all you had on a division and then a storage root or two, that would be considered a small division. Something with 3 to 5 plus eyes would be considered a large division. And it may be the case that gardeners, regular gardeners in their garden, might just cut this into a half this way and a half this way and end up with sections with 7 or 8 or 10 eyes on them. That's perfectly fine from a gardener's point of view. I think from a grower's or propagator's point of view, you're trying to get as many divisions out of this as you kind of can while still getting it back into productivity quickly. And a word on that is to say that you can expect that even with 3 or 5 eyes, that sometimes they will skip a year after going back into the garden of flowering, just because peonies do not love to be moved. So I should probably just dive right in now and see if I can get some sections, and best not to overthink it. This one here is a bit hollow on the inside of this tuber and it's in the way. Once you have an idea of how you want to get in there, it is nice to have a sharp knife for this kind of work. I think the ladies I used to work with would use a machete for this kind of thing. And I'm going to use a kitchen knife here. And then we can just pry some of this apart and see if we can get some viable sections. I'm going to keep on dividing here. There you go. This one here, okay, what do we have? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe a couple of small eyes on there, and some largish storage roots on that. I feel pretty comfortable, pretty confident with that. So that one's a win. This one here, I'm just going to show you another example. Big storage root on this. I see no sign of eyes on here. Nothing notable. I wouldn't count on this as a successful thing. I would think this would be a cast off or garbage. Next one here, let's have a look. Got nice big eyes, 1, 2, a couple of small ones there, 3, 4, 5, you know, maybe a few other small ones on there, but at least 5 on there. Big storage roots on there. So I would say that's a win. This one might actually be a little bit oversized, and you can see here it's got like, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You know, it's got a ton in there. And the only thing that gives me pause here, because I have a lot of eyes on here, is where would I make my cut actually, where it would end up with both eyes on it as well as sufficient storage roots. And quite possibly, if I were looking at it here, I would say, okay, right along there would end up with 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe eyes on this side and a big storage root on this side. And then this side would end up with a bunch on that. So let's carefully do that. And where that ends me up is a division here with 1, 2, 3, 4 eyes, and a cut over here that ends me up with, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 maybe eyes on here, again with reasonable sized storage roots on there. This one here, I can't make that additional division, and I'm looking at this, and even with just this sort of finger-sized storage root down here, and, you know, a couple of other ones, it isn't a ton for the eyes on this thing. And if I were to try to cut, say, this section over here into one and this section over here into another, I'm not confident I would end up with enough storage root energy on there for it to make a satisfactory cutting. So in total, then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 off of that division, or that clump. One more step before we consider putting them back in the ground or potting them is to give them a short curing period. And by curing, I just mean like this, laying them out in the open in a relatively dry place, because I want to draw down their moisture. They still have plenty of moisture in their tissues from where they were growing in the ground, and of course when we were rinsing them off as well. Now, I'm not talking about putting them down on the concrete in bright sun. That will dry them out far too quickly, but in a semi-shaded location like this, just for a few hours or at maximum overnight, should be good to reduce that risk of rotting once they go back in the ground or into a pot. This has been sitting in the range of 2 to 3 hours now, and I can already see that it's becoming more pale on the surface here. Not as many dark spots where the soil was. I would consider this ready to plant right now. As for pots, I like to go for a 2 or 3 gallon pot, just so you have some height in case you have a big chunky division that you can fit the whole thing in. What I've done here is I've just sort of pre-filled the bottom of the pot with some potting soil here and press this down and in so you get the appropriate height. And again, appropriate height in this case is meaning that I want to get these eyes that you see here within about 1 inch or 2 inches of the top of the pot. They should be covered, but not by a whole ton. Then I can take the extra potting soil that I brought here and go ahead and fill it, tap it to remove any voids that are there, press it down around the outside, and then go ahead and cover over the top until you have the right level approximately. So I potted 3 in there. I got 2 hefty chunks for the garden that I will go ahead and dig in now. Not bad for about 15 minutes total of work digging it out and dividing it, plus a little bit of time letting them cure out in the greenhouse. It is important to get these chunks either potted into pots or into the ground pretty quickly after that short curing period. Tellingly, our supplier emphasized that while they have the conditions to keep the right moisture and temperatures to have these overwinter in their care, I don't have those conditions, and so you need to get them into the ground relatively quickly, especially because if you dug them in fall, you get them back in the ground in the fall, you take advantage of that, say, next 4 to 6 weeks of relatively reasonable temperatures to have some early root development before they go into winter, and then they can come out the next year strong, hopefully with some flowers. Sometimes they'll sulk for a year. All right, if you have any questions about division of perennials or anything else to do with growing plants, please go ahead and drop those into the comments below the video. I'll see what I can do to help.